The massive double doors of the Vance family estate in Hillsborough, California, swung open with a dramatic creak that echoed through the frigid Christmas Eve air. Alia Vance stood frozen on the marble steps, her breath visible in small panicked puffs. Behind her parents, Langston and Oilia, loomed the opulent foyer she had known her entire life, now transformed into a glittering stage for someone else's triumph. The 15-foot noble fir tree sparkled with white lights and crystal ornaments. White orchids cascaded from every surface, and the faint clink of champagne. Glasses mingled with the low hum of conversation from the catering staff, preparing for a dinner party of 20, but none of that warmth was meant for her. Her father, Langston Vance, a tall, imposing man with salt and pepper, hair and the perpetual air of a man who had never been told no, held the door wide. In his other hand was Alia's single Louis Vuitton duffel bag, the only one her younger sister, Vivica, hadn't claimed over the years. Without a word, he set it down on the frozen steps with deliberate care, as though it were a package being delivered to the wrong address. Vivica stood just behind their parents, arms crossed over the backless red silk gown that hugged her figure perfectly. On her left hand gleamed a 6-carat radiant-cut diamond engagement ring, catching the light from the chandelier like a weapon. Her lips curled into a smirk that Alia knew all too well, the same one she'd worn since childhood whenever she got the bigger bedroom, the better gifts, the louder praise. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," Vivica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, loud enough for the tuxedoed waiters to hear. Alia's heart pounded in her chest. She had arrived home just hours earlier, exhausted from a 32-mile drive south from San Francisco on Highway 1. Traffic had been brutal, but she'd made it. Clutching the small desk plant from her now former job at the ad agency, a termination email had hit her inbox that morning. Another restructuring. 6 years of late nights, award-winning campaigns, and unwavering loyalty, gone in a single paragraph. She'd called her mother from the parking garage. "Mama, I just need to crash for a couple of weeks while I sort things out." Oilia's response had been distracted. Clipped. Dinner at 7, then a quick hang-up. Walking through those doors, Alia had felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. The house looked like a spread from Architectural Digest. Impeccable, extravagant, untouchable. Her father uncorking a bottle of Dom Perignon, 2005, her mother fastening a new strand of South Sea pearls, and Vivica twirling in that red gown, with Darius, the ex-boyfriend of 4 years, standing behind her, arm possessively around her waist. Alia had dropped her keys in the bowl by the door and forced a smile. "Hey y'all, rough day at work." That was when the performance began. Vivica spun around, eyes wide with mock concern. "Oh my God, again?" she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" She turned to their mother. "Remember when she got fired from that startup in Soma for not being a culture fit?" Oilia's lips thinned into a tight line. Langston didn't even look up from his champagne. "It was a reduction in force, Viva," Alia corrected quietly. "They let go of the whole creative team." Vivica waved her new ring dismissively. "Darius just closed his Series A, $28 million pre-money valuation. The investors love him." Darius gave Alia that same smug smirk he'd used 2 years ago when he'd ended things with the classic line, "It's not you, it's the timing." Then Langston set his glass down with a soft clink that somehow silenced the room. "Alia, we need to talk." He didn't invite her to sit. He never did when the news was bad. Standing there in the foyer, surrounded by the scent of fresh pine and orchids, Alia listened as her father explained, calmly, coldly, that he had amended the family trust last month. The entire $38 million in assets was now irrevocably in Vivica's name. Signed, notarized, filed with the estate attorney in Palo Alto. "You're 32 capable," he said. "It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. Oilia added without looking at her eldest daughter, "We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results." Alia felt heat rise in her cheeks. Her salary had never paid for the orchids, the Birkin bags, the Dom Perignon. She'd gone to Stanford, built a career, always striving to make them proud. And now this. Vivica had her phone out, recording. "Yes, this is gold," she laughed. "The big sister comes. Crawling back broke on Christmas. Eve, say something for my followers." Alia looked at her father. "Are you serious?" He met her eyes, cold, final. You have 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back in tomorrow for the rest. Make an appointment. Her mother busied herself adjusting a gold ornament on the tree. Alia walked up the curved staircase on autopilot. Her childhood bedroom still had the high school swim team photos on the walls, her Stanford diploma framed above the desk. She threw jeans, 2 sweaters, her laptop, toiletries into the old duffel. Everything else, books, yearbooks, memories, would have to wait. When she came back down, Vivica was live on Instagram, narrating like a wildlife documentary. And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad little bag. Any bets on how long before she's sleeping in that Civic? Langston opened the front door himself. The fog had thickened. The temperature was plunging below freezing. "Merry Christmas, Alia!" Vivica shouted as the door began to close. "Don't freeze." The heavy door shut with a soft, expensive click. The alarm chirped twice as it armed. And that was it. In less than 30 minutes, Alia went from daughter to intruder. She stood on the marble steps in the dark, the duffel at her feet, wearing the long cashmere coat that was now her only real possession of value. The fog swallowed the driveway. She couldn't see the street. Everything was silent except the blood pounding in her ears. Her mind replayed her father's flat voice. 38 million gone with a signature. Her mother refusing to meet her eyes. Vivica's laughter echoing. She started walking because standing still felt worse. The suitcase wheels rattled. Over the perfect pavement, the only sound in the gated community. Every mansion she passed glowed with warm golden windows. Laughter spilling out, Christmas trees twinkling behind wrought iron gates. Each one reminded her she no longer belonged anywhere. Her fingers went numb inside her pockets. She kept thinking, this can't be real. Any minute Mama will open the door and call me back. It'll be a cruel lesson in gratitude. But the alarm stayed armed. No footsteps, nothing. She walked for what felt like hours, maybe 20 minutes, maybe longer, until she reached the small public garden beside the old Episcopal church. An iron bench sat beneath a working street lamp. She collapsed onto it, let go of the suitcase handle, and finally let the tears come. She cried for the little girl who used to hide under the 15-foot tree waiting for Santa. She cried for every birthday where Vivica got the bigger gift and she was told to be grateful. She cried because she'd always believed that if she just worked harder, achieved more, kept her hair straight and her grades perfect, they would finally see her. Turns out none of it mattered. She wasn't disposable because she failed. She was disposable because she wasn't Vivica. The tears froze on her cheeks. She hugged her knees to her chest, staring at the snow-dusted ground, trying to figure out how she would survive the night, let alone the rest of her life. That's when she heard the slow shuffle of bare feet on cement. Alia looked up. An elderly woman was dragging herself toward the bench, silver hair matted and loose, thin shoulders hunched against the wind, skin ashy and translucent under the lamp. Her feet were bare, turning a terrifying shade of purple-white. She stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly, and spoke in a raspy voice. "Young lady, do you know if any of the shelters still have space tonight? I've been walking all the way from Burlingame. Everything is full." Alia wiped her face quickly. "I'm sorry, I don't have anywhere to go either." The woman studied her for a long moment, eyes piercing despite the exhaustion. Then she slumped onto the bench, leaving polite distance between them. They sat in silence while the woman's breathing steadied. Alia noticed the bare feet again, the color deepening. Frostbite setting in. Something inside Alia cracked. Here was someone who had even less than she did tonight. And she was still polite enough to ask instead of demand. Without a word, Alia stood, unbuttoned her long cashmere coat, the only thing keeping her from freezing, and draped it gently over the woman's trembling shoulders. The woman seemed startled, then closed her eyes as the warmth enveloped her. Her thin, veined hands clutched the fabric. Tears shone in her pale eyes. "What is your name, child?" "Alia," she answered, voice cracking. The woman repeated it softly, like something precious. "Thank you, Alia." Then she took both of Alia's freezing hands in hers, squeezed once and held her gaze for a long, silent moment. No words, just deep understanding passing between two strangers who, in that instant, were no longer strangers. After what felt like forever, the woman let go, stood with newfound steadiness, and gave the smallest smile. She walked away, swallowed slowly by the fog and night. Alia sat back down alone, colder than she'd ever been, teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. But for the first time since the door shut behind her, the pain in her chest felt different, lighter. Giving away the last thing she had somehow gave her back something she'd lost. Kindness, even in the darkest moment, had reminded her who she really was. The cold bit deeper now that the cashmere coat was gone. Alia sat alone on the iron bench, arms wrapped tightly around herself, trying to trap whatever warmth remained. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, each shiver sending sharp pain through her jaw and down her spine. The fog pressed in from every side, thick and wet, swallowing the streetlights until they glowed like distant ghosts. The garden around her was silent except for the occasional rustle of bare branches in the wind. She didn't know how long she sat there, minutes bleeding into an hour, maybe more. Time had lost its edges. Her mind kept circling back to the house on the hill, the warm lights, the laughter, the door clicking shut behind her. She wondered if anyone inside had even paused their celebration long enough to notice she was truly gone. Probably not. Vivica was likely still live-streaming the party, showing off her ring, her gown, her perfect life. Alia's phone battery was at 9%. She had turned off location services, data, everything non-essential to preserve what little power remained. No missed calls, no texts. Not even a single, "Are you okay?" from her mother. The silence from her family felt louder than any scream. She considered her options, turning them over like stones in her freezing hands. The old Honda Civic was still parked in the guest loop at the estate. Security would have towed it by now, or at least blocked her from retrieving it tonight. She had $43 in cash, a debit card linked to an account with less than $200, and a credit card with a limit she had never dared max out. Enough for a cheap motel room, maybe 2 nights if she was careful. After that, nothing. The shelters the old woman had mentioned were miles away, and most would be full on Christmas Eve. Alia had no idea how the system worked. She had never needed to know. She thought about calling a friend, but who? Most of her college circle had drifted after graduation, and the few coworkers she'd been close to at the agency had scattered after the layoffs. Pride, exhaustion, and shame kept her thumb hovering over the screen without pressing call. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier, fat flakes drifting through the cone of light from the street lamp. They melted instantly on her eyelashes and cheeks. She tucked her hands under her armpits and tried to slow her breathing. Panic wouldn't help. She needed a plan. That was when the sound of tires on wet pavement cut through the quiet. At first, she thought it was a neighbor returning late from a party. But the sound was too uniform, multiple vehicles moving in perfect coordination. Headlights appeared at the far end of the garden, cutting pale tunnels through the fog. Then another set, and another. Alia counted 19 identical black SUVs, BMW 760s. She recognized the silhouette, pulling up in silent formation, blocking the entire narrow street that bordered the garden. No engines revved, no doors slammed, just absolute precision. The middle vehicle's rear door opened on its own, smooth and soundless. A figure stepped out. Alia's breath caught. It was the elderly woman from the bench, the same face, the same piercing eyes, but transformed. Her silver hair was now pulled back into an elegant, low bun that gleamed even in the dim light. She wore a floor-length camel haircoat, cinched at the waist with a thin leather belt, red-soled heels that clicked softly on the pavement. Diamonds glinted at her wrist and ears. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to raise her voice to be obeyed. She walked straight toward the bench, the fog parting around her like theater curtains. The other doors remained closed. No security emerged. It was as if the entire convoy existed only to deliver her. Alia stood slowly, legs stiff from cold, unsure whether to feel fear or hope. The woman stopped a few feet away and smiled, not the weary half smile from earlier, but something warm, knowing, almost amused. "Alia," she said softly, as though they were old friends meeting for coffee. Alia's voice came out hoarse. How do you know my name?" "I know many things," the woman replied. "More than most. May I sit?" Alia nodded numbly. The woman lowered herself onto the bench with perfect posture, arranging the coat around her as though it were a throne. Up close, Alia could see she was older than she'd first appeared, late 70s, perhaps, but her skin was luminous. Her eyes sharp as cut glass. "My name is Odora St. Clair," she said, "and I have been watching you." Alia took a half step back. Watching me? Not in the way you fear, Eudora said gently. My security team has been discreet. 2 blocks away, plain clothes, no interference. They saw you give away your coat. They saw you walk here alone. They saw you sit without calling anyone, without posting anything, without trying to discover who I was. Just enduring. Alia wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Why would anyone watch me? Because every Christmas Eve for the past 25 years, I do the same thing. Eudora's gaze drifted to the falling snow. I leave my estate dressed as someone who has nothing. No purse, no phone, no visible protection. I walk the streets until I find someone who still has a heart when they believe no one is looking. She turned back to Alia. Most years, I walk all night and return home disappointed. People see an old woman in distress and they look away. They cross the street. They pretend to be on important calls. Some film me for content without ever offering help. A few offer money, always money, but never warmth. Never the last thing keeping them alive. Eudora's voice softened. This year I found you. You gave me the only coat you had. You asked for nothing in return. You didn't even ask my name. Alia swallowed hard. You looked like you needed it more. That is precisely why I am here. Eudora stood. I needed to know if that moment was genuine or if it was performance. My team has observed you for 48 hours. You checked into a motel with cash. You ate vending machine food. You applied to 50 jobs in one sitting. You cried in the shower. And you never once tried to find the homeless woman or boast about your good deed. She paused, letting the words settle. You are the first person in 15 years who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without expecting anything back. Alia's knees felt weak. She sat down hard on the bench. I don't understand. What do you want from me? Eudora's expression turned fierce, almost tender. I have no children, no heirs. When I am gone, strangers on a board will decide where my money goes. I do not want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be discarded on Christmas Eve, to decide how we help the next person who is thrown away. She extended a gloved hand. I am offering you a room in my home, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If, at the end, you are the person I believe you are, the foundation will be yours to run, not as a gift, as a responsibility. Alia stared at the hand. Her mind raced, trying to catch up. This couldn't be real. People didn't appear out of the fog with black motorcades and billion-dollar offers. Why me? She whispered. Eudora's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something harder. Because I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a frozen bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father did that to me. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would make sure no one who chose right in that moment stayed lost. She waited, hand still extended. So, Alia Vance, will you come home with me? Alia looked at the convoy, then back at Eudora. The cold was seeping into her bones now, sharp and relentless. She thought of the motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes, the vending machine dinner waiting for her, the endless job applications that might never be answered. She thought of the bench, the coat, the moment she had chosen kindness over survival. She reached out and took Eudora's hand. The grip was warm, steady, unbreakable. The ride to Atherton took 20 minutes. Though it felt both endless and instantaneous, Alia sat in the plush back seat of the middle BMW. Wrapped in a heated blanket, a silent driver had produced from nowhere. Eudora sat beside her, staring out at the passing redwoods, giving Alia space to process. They passed through gates Alia had never noticed. Before, hidden behind a 10-foot hedge on a quiet cul-de-sac she must have driven, past 1,000 times. The mansion that emerged was a 1920s Tudor masterpiece, stone facade, leaded windows, chimneys breathing soft smoke into the night sky. Warm light spilled from every window. Inside smelled of cedar and roses. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to stand in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private lake shimmering under moonlight. A tall, silver-haired woman in a tailored navy suit waited in the foyer, Claudia O'Neill. Eudora introduced her as chief of staff. Claudia's handshake was firm, her eyes assessing but not unkind. "Welcome, Miss Vance," Claudia said. "Your room is ready." Eudora led Alia through hushed corridors lined with art. Alia vaguely recognized as priceless. They stopped at double doors on the east wing. "Your bedroom," Eudora said simply, opening them. The room was larger than Alia's parents' entire downstairs. A king bed dressed in white linens faced French doors opening onto a private rose garden, scent drifting in even in winter. A fireplace glowed softly. An ensuite bathroom gleamed with marble and heated floors. On the bed lay fresh clothes, soft cashmere sweater, tailored jeans, warm socks, all in her exact size. "I took the liberty," Eudora said quietly. "You've been wearing the same outfit for 2 days." Alia's throat tightened. "Thank you. Dinner's in an hour if you feel up to it. If not, a tray will be brought here." "No pressure." Eudora paused at the door. "You are safe now, Alia. Rest." The door closed softly. Alia stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, afraid to touch anything. Then she walked to the French doors and looked out at the garden. Snow still fell, but here it looked magical rather than menacing. She sank onto the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry, not the frozen tears, from the bench but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she hadn't known existed. Relief, grief, terror, hope, all of it pouring out until she was empty. When the storm passed, she showered in water as hot as she could stand, washed her hair with shampoo that smelled like real roses, and dressed in the soft new clothes. They fit perfectly. Dinner was served in a small breakfast room overlooking the lake. Just Eudora and Alia. Simple food. Roasted chicken. Winter vegetables, warm bread. No staff hovering. Eudora poured them both sparkling water. They spoke little at first. Then Eudora told her story in quiet, measured sentences. Her father had been old money East Coast. When she refused the marriage he arranged, he cut her off entirely, one suitcase, one night. Much like Alia's, she had built St. Clair, commercial realty, from nothing after marrying a brilliant but penniless developer who died young. She took the company private, poured profits into the foundation. Now it deployed $120 million annually to housing, education, and economic justice. "I do not want another rich girl playing philanthropist," Eudora said. "I want someone who remembers the bench." Alia listened, barely touching her food. That night, she slept deeper than she had in years. The next morning, Christmas Day, Claudia knocked at 8 sharp with a thick leather binder. "Welcome to boot camp," Claudia said, no smile this time. "Training begins today." And so began the hardest, most exhilarating chapter of Alia's life. The first rays of winter. Sunlight filtered through the French. Doors of Alia's new bedroom in the east. Wing of Eudora St. Clair's Atherton estate. It was Monday, December 29th, 4 days after Christmas Eve, and Alia woke before the alarm. Claudia had set for 5:45 a.m. Her body still ached from cold that no longer existed, as though the memory of the frozen bench had lodged itself in her muscles. She dressed quickly in the workout clothes laid out the night before. Black leggings, moisture-wicking top, running shoes that felt like clouds compared to her old pair. At precisely 6 a.m., a knock sounded. Claudia O'Neill stood in the hallway, silver hair in a severe ponytail, holding a steaming mug of black coffee. "Morning run," Claudia said, handing over the mug. "Drink half now, half after. We leave in 5. Alia obeyed. The coffee was strong, unsweetened, exactly how she had always taken it. Though she had never told anyone here, someone had noticed. The ex-Navy trainer waiting outside was named Reyes, compact, mid-40s, with the kind of quiet intensity that made small talk impossible. He led them on a 4-mile loop around the private lake that bordered the estate. The path wound through redwoods and manicured gardens still dusted with snow. Alia's lungs burned by mile 2, but she refused to slow. Reyes never offered encouragement or criticism. He simply set the pace and expected her to match it. When they returned, sweat-soaked despite the cold, Eudora was waiting on the terrace in a camel robe, reading the Financial Times. She glanced up, nodded once in approval, and returned to her paper. Breakfast followed at 7:30 in the glass-walled morning room. No staff hovered. Claudia served steel-cut oats with fresh berries, poached eggs, and whole-grain toast. Eudora ate slowly, quizzing Alia on the previous night's reading, a 180-page primer on nonprofit, governance and IRS form, 990 PF. Alia had stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing it. "What is the difference between a private foundation and a public charity?" Eudora asked without looking up from her plate. Alia recited the distinctions, funding sources, payout requirements, excise taxes, trying not to stumble. Eudora listened, then corrected 2 minor points with surgical precision. "Good," she said finally. You'll need to read a real 990 PF before lunch. Claudia has the last 5 years of ours printed. By 9:00 a.m., they were in the back seat of a black town car heading north on Sand Hill Road, the beating heart of Silicon Valley. Venture capital. The St. Clair family Foundation's offices occupied the entire top floor of a low-glass building wedged between Kleiner Perkins and Andreessen Horowitz. The boardroom overlooked rolling hills still green from recent rain. 12 people sat around a polished walnut table, mostly white, mostly male, mostly older than 60. They wore Patagonia vests over Oxford shirts or tailored suits with open collars. When Eudora entered, conversation stopped. When Aaliyah followed, eyebrows rose. Eudora introduced her simply. This is Alia Vance. She will be shadowing me for the foreseeable future. No one asked questions, yet. The agenda that day was a $15 million commitment to a workforce housing initiative in San Jose, spreadsheets, projected returns, impact metrics, risk analyses. Alia sat beside Eudora, taking notes on a yellow legal pad because Eudora believed screens distracted from real listening. One partner from a major real estate fund argued that the projected 4.2% return was too low. We can get 8% in market rate multifamily with half the headache, he said. Eudora's response was ice. Then invest there. We are not here to maximize return. We are here to house people who cannot afford market rate. Alia watched the room dynamics shift, deference wrapped in frustration. She scribbled furiously. Lunch was a working meal, salads delivered from a local farm-to-table place. Eudora handed Alia the Foundation's 5 most recent 990 PFs, each hundreds of pages detailing every grant, every expense, every investment. By Friday, Eudora said, I want you to be able to explain any line item to a skeptical IRS auditor. Alia swallowed. That was 4 days. Evenings blurred into marathon study. Sessions in the estate's library, a 2-story room lined with leather-bound books and modern reports alike. Claudia drilled her on governance, how to handle conflicts of interest, how to fire a grantee caught embezzling, how to say no to a senator's pet project without losing federal matching funds. Eudora's favorite phrase became a mantra. We don't give fish. We don't even give fishing lessons. We buy the damn river and make sure everyone can eat forever. In January, Alia enrolled in Stanford's Graduate School of Business, executive program for nonprofit leaders, full tuition covered, no discussion. 3 nights a week, she drove the 5 miles to campus, sitting in seminars with CEOs and foundation directors twice her age. She learned outcome measurement, theories of change, adaptive leadership. She wrote papers comparing donor-advised funds to private foundations and presented them to Eudora over breakfast for red ink dissection. Weekends meant site visits. First stop, a battered women's shelter in East Oakland. Alia spent an afternoon interviewing residents, mothers who had fled with nothing but trash bags of clothes, and their children. One woman, Marisol, showed Alia the tiny room she shared with her 2 daughters. Bunk beds, 1 dresser, a single window overlooking a parking lot. I never thought I'd be grateful for a window that looks at cars, Marisol said quietly. But it means we're safe. Alia took notes, but mostly she listened. Next, an after-school program in East San Jose, serving mostly Latino and Vietnamese kids. A 17-year-old named Jade explained how the center's homework lab kept her from joining. A gang, her older brother hadn't had the same option. I want to be an engineer, Jade said. This place makes me believe I can. Every story carved itself into Alia's memory. Back at the estate, she rewrote grant guidelines from scratch. Shorter applications, faster decisions, mandatory site visits within 30 days of approval. Eudora bled red ink over every draft, then made Alia defend each change in front of the full board. There were nights she collapsed on the kitchen island, face pressed to a spreadsheet, asleep before Claudia could nudge her to bed. There were mornings she cried in the shower, convinced she was an imposter who would never be enough. But every time doubt threatened to swallow her, she remembered the frozen bench, the coat, the moment she chose kindness when bitterness would have been easier. She kept going. June arrived warm and sudden. One Thursday morning, Eudora texted, "Library now." Alia walked in expecting another grueling strategy session. Instead, Eudora stood alone in sunlight, streaming through stained glass windows, holding a single cream folder. She slid it across the mahogany table. Inside, an employment agreement on heavy stock paper. Title, President and CEO, St. Clair Family Foundation. Reporting directly to the board, meaning Odora until she decided otherwise. Base salary, $195,000. Equity, 3% stake in the endowment, currently valued just under $4 billion. Authority, full decision-making over programs starting year 3, subject only to fiduciary duty. Alia looked up, speechless. Odora sat, folding her hands. I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat. Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes when a camera might be watching. I watched you for 5 months straight. Her voice softened, cracked just once. I saw you fight. For that domestic violence shelter, when every banker wanted to defund it because the numbers looked messy. I saw you sit on a folding chair in Oakland until midnight, listening to a 17-year-old explain why she couldn't go home. I saw you rewrite a 70-page policy manual, because one paragraph would have left transgender, kids without a bed. She leaned forward. You have the mind I need, Alia, and you have the heart I lost a long time ago. The foundation is yours to steer. I'll stay on the board to keep the old guard in check. But day to day, the river belongs to you. Alia tried to speak. Nothing came. Odora waved it off. Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish the endowment tax module first. Alia laughed through sudden tears and signed. That night they opened a 1982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace, just the two of them, watching sunset bleed into the redwoods. Odora raised her glass to the girl who had every reason to turn bitter and chose kindness anyway. Alia clinked hers against it, and to the woman who refused to let a good deed stay invisible. They drank in silence, the wine tasting like victory and vindication. For the first time since Christmas Eve, Alia felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The weight of responsibility no longer felt like a burden. It felt like wings. October in San Francisco carried the scent of wet leaves and ambition. From the 22nd floor of 2000 California Street, Vance could see the fog rolling in over the Golden Gate like a slow-moving tide. Her corner office, glass on 2 sides, redwood accents, a single orchid on the credenza, was quiet except for the soft hum of the city below. She had just finished reviewing final projections for Second Home, the Foundation's flagship, permanent supportive housing, project 200 units, on-site clinic, job training, preschool, rooftop farm. Opening day was 6 weeks away. Every detail had her fingerprints on it. Claudia buzzed the intercom once. Your sister and Darius Whitaker are in the lobby. No appointment. Alia's stomach dropped, the old reflex. Like stepping onto a porch and finding a snake coiled where you expected welcome. She took a slow breath. Send them up. She didn't stand when they entered. She remained behind the wide desk, hands clasped, watching them cross the threshold as though they were strangers asking for a grant. Vivica, her younger sister, once the undisputed queen of every room, wore a modest navy sheath dress that looked borrowed from someone more conservative. Her hair was pulled into a low ponytail. No extensions, minimal jewelry, except the 6-carat ring that suddenly seemed too heavy for her hand. Darius stood half a step, behind her in a navy suit that fit well enough to be new but lacked the careless confidence of his old hoodie and sneakers uniform. Both wore practiced expressions, remorseful eyes, tight, apologetic smiles. Vivica spoke first, voice soft, almost fragile. Alia, I've been horrible. We've been horrible. I'm so sorry for everything. Christmas Eve, the video. All of it. Darius nodded vigorously. We're getting married next spring. Trying to do things the right way this time. Alia waited. Silence was a tool she had learned from Odora. Vivica took a breath. Daddy's in trouble. Some investments went south. He and Mama might lose the house. And Darius's company, AI for Elder Care, just needs $2 million to close the seed round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. Alia raised one eyebrow. Which part is life or death? The mortgage or the valuation? Darius forced a small laugh. Look, I get it. You're big time now. But blood is blood, right? $2 million is nothing here. Alia leaned back slightly. Tell me what happened to the $38 million trust fund you inherited last December. Vivica's mask flickered for the first time. We diversified. Crypto, NFTs, some angel deals Darius's friends were running. It was supposed to 10 times fast. Darius jumped in. Market downturn happens to everyone. Sequoia lost billions too. We just need a bridge. Alia opened the slim folder Claudia had placed on her desk that morning. Inside, screenshots of transactions, bank statements, A Forbes article titled, Vance Family Bets Inheritance on Memecoins. She spun it so they could see. 87% gone in 11 months, she said calmly. 2 Lamborghinis, a deposit on a Miami condo, influencer payments to pump coins that crashed to zero. That's not a downturn, Darius. That's arson. Vivica flushed scarlet. You're seriously going to sit there in your fancy office and let Mama and Daddy go homeless? Alia pressed the intercom. Security to 22, please. Darius tried sweet reason. Come on, Aaliyah. 2 million is chump change to this foundation. You won't even miss it. The door opened. 2 suited guards stepped in. Alia stood. This foundation exists for people who never had a safety net. Not for people who set theirs on fire and now want mine. You're not getting a dime. Not today. Not ever. Vivica's composure shattered. You ungrateful... She was already fumbling for her phone, thumb hitting record as the guards took her elbows. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, 3 paparazzi vans and a local gossip blogger were waiting outside the glass doors. Someone, Vivica or Darius, had tipped them off. Vivica launched into a full performance, tears streaming, voice trembling. My billionaire sister won't even help our parents keep their home. Family first. She tagged it, Toxic Sister. The video exploded. 10 million views in 6 hours. Then the internet did what it does best. Former classmates surfaced yearbook photos of Vivica pouring yogurt into Alia's backpack senior year. Someone unearthed the Christmas Eve Instagram Live, Vivica laughing while Alia dragged her suitcase into the fog. A former nanny went on record about the pranks that included locking 10-year-old Alia outside in the rain. Comments flipped from sympathy to outrage. Vance Family Exposed trended higher than the original video. Darius's pitch deck leaked, accidentally forwarded by a foundation. Staffer to a reporter. The AI startup was 90% slideware and 10% his cousin's garage code. Investors ghosted. The wedding planner canceled, deposit unpaid. Vivica's follower count plummeted. Alia never posted a word. That night in Atherton, Claudia poured 2 fingers of scotch and handed her a glass. Poetic justice tastes better when you don't lift a finger, Claudia said. Alia raised her glass to the dark window. It tastes like closure. November brought fog that never lifted. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Pacific Crest Capital, a $4.2 billion fund, promising 18% guaranteed returns, collapsed in a Ponzi scheme. The founder had fled to Cabo on a yacht. The FBI raided offices in Newport Beach. Langston Vance had moved every remaining dollar into it 6 months earlier. Mortgage refinance, home equity line, even Oilia's jewelry. He told friends it would get them back on track. 30 days later, the foreclosure notice was taped to the Hillsborough mansion's front door. No bidders at auction. The bank took possession. Langston, Oilia, and Vivica moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon on Story Road in East San Jose. Rent, $1,900. Month, the most they could afford on Langston's social, security, and whatever part-time work Oilia could find. Vivica's credit cards were maxed at $247,000, mostly handbags and retail therapy. Collection agencies called non-stop. One rainy Thursday morning, security called up Mr. and Mrs. Vance and Ms. Vivica Vance in the lobby. No appointment. Alia exhaled slowly, let all 3 in. She met them in the small glass conference room. No water, no coffee offered. Claudia stood outside the door. Her father looked 20 years older, hair snow white, shoulders hunched, wearing a sport coat 2 sizes too big. Her mother had cut and dyed, her hair a cheap drugstore brown that didn't quite match. Vivica wore no makeup, eyes puffy, clutching a knockoff purse like it might vanish. Langston spoke first, voice cracking. Alia, you're my daughter. I know we hurt you. I know we don't deserve anything. But we have nowhere else to turn. The apartment lease is up in 6 weeks. We'll be on the street. Oilia stared at the table, twisting a handkerchief into knots. Vivica looked up, eyes red. Please. Just enough for a fresh start. We'll sign whatever you want. We'll never ask again. Alia opened a black folder and placed 3 business cards on the table. First, Marcus Chen, certified financial planner, specializing in post-bankruptcy recovery. Second, a free 8-week financial literacy and debt management course funded by the foundation, held at the East San Jose Community Center. Third, the California Crisis Hotline and a local therapist accepting sliding scale fees. She pushed the cards forward. This is what the St. Clair Foundation offers anyone who walks in here, broken and scared, she said. Voice neutral. Strangers get exactly this help. It is the same help I can give you. Langston's hand trembled as he reached halfway, then stopped. That's it? After 32 years, that's all you have for your own father? Alia stood. You had choices, Langston. You chose to rewrite the trust. You chose to chase returns too good to be true. You chose silence when Vivica humiliated me for sport. Those were your choices, not mine. Oilia finally met her eyes, tears streaming. We were wrong. We're so sorry. I believe you're sorry now, Alia said. But sorry doesn't rebuild a life. Work does, courage does, responsibility does. Vivica began sobbing, loud, messy. You're enjoying this. You want us to suffer. Alia walked to the door and held it open. No, she said quietly. I just refuse to pay for your suffering anymore. Security escorted them out. Langston never looked back. Oilia whispered, I'm sorry one last time as the elevator doors closed. Vivica cried until the lobby. Claudia handed Alia a tissue she hadn't realized she needed. They'll be all right, Claudia said. People who hit rock bottom either stay there or start climbing. You gave them the only ladder we're allowed to give. Alia nodded, watching rain streak the windows. For the first time in almost 2 years, the ache in her chest was gone. Not replaced by joy, just space. Space to breathe. The sky over East Palo Alto on opening day was the color of polished steel. Low clouds holding the promise of rain that never quite arrived. Second home stood complete. 4 stories of glass and redwood. Wrapped around a central courtyard where rosemary and kale already grew in raised planters. Children's laughter echoed off the walls as kids chased each other between the beds, testing the boundaries of their new world. 3,000 people filled the plaza in front of the building. Families who would soon move in. Donors in quiet suits. City council members with practiced smiles. Reporters from every major network. Even the governor scheduled to cut the ribbon. Backstage, Alia Vance adjusted the collar of her simple black suit. Her heart pounded louder than the brass band warming up on the platform. This project had consumed her for nearly 2 years. Every grant application, every zoning fight, every sleepless night poring over blueprints and budgets. Second home was permanent supportive housing done right. 200 units. An on-site medical clinic, job training center, preschool, rooftop farm, and a policy carved in stone. No one would ever be turned away for lack of paperwork. Claudia squeezed her hand once, steady as always. Odora St. Clair sat in the front row, elegant in winter white, giving Alia the smallest nod of pride. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd roared as the MC called her name. Alia walked to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any trust document she had ever signed. She looked out over the sea of faces, hopeful, curious, expectant. Near the back, almost hidden behind a concrete pillar, stood 3 figures she had not invited. Langston, Oilia, and Vivica. Her father wore an old navy peacoat that hung loose on his thinner frame. His white hair was neatly combed, but his eyes carried the weight of defeat. Her mother clutched a paper coffee cup as though it might disappear. Her drugstore brown hair tucked under a knit hat. Vivica had cut her hair short. No extensions, no armor of designer labels. She looked strangely small, eyes fixed on the ground. Alia let the silence settle for 3 full seconds. 1 year ago tonight, she began, voice steady and amplified across the plaza. I was kicked out of the only home I had ever known, with 1 suitcase and nowhere to go. A ripple moved through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in tighter. I learned that night what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. She paused, letting the words land. But I also learned something else, on a frozen park bench in Hillsborough. True family isn't DNA. True family is the stranger who chooses to see you when you are invisible. True family is the hand that reaches out when you have nothing left to give in return. She turned and gestured to the building behind her. This is second home. 200 families will never again have to sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Children will never again do homework in the back seat because the lights got cut off. And every single person who walks through these doors will be told the same thing. I needed to hear that Christmas Eve. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. The applause started slow, then swelled into a wave. People rose to their feet. Phones lifted like a constellation of lights. Alia waited for the crest to break, then spoke again. Softer, so every microphone strained to catch it. Tonight, we open these doors for every person who has ever been told they don't belong, especially for those who were told that by the people who were supposed to love them the most. She looked straight across the plaza at the three figures in the back. Langston's shoulders began to shake. Oilia covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Vivica finally lifted her eyes, met Alia's gaze, and could not hold it. Alia did not smile. She did not frown. She simply held their eyes for one heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then she stepped away from the podium. The governor cut the ribbon. The band struck up a triumphant march. Children rushed forward with handmade flowers. Reporters shouted questions Alia pretended not to hear. She walked down the steps through the parting crowd, straight toward the main entrance. Langston tried to step forward. Alia! She kept walking. Not fast, not slow, just forward. Oilia reached out a hand that never touched her. Vivica opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in her life, said nothing at all. Alia passed within 2 feet of them without breaking stride. The massive redwood doors of Second Home slid open automatically at her approach. Warm light spilled out onto the concrete, inviting, unwavering. She crossed the threshold. The doors closed behind her with a soft, final whisper. She never looked back. Not because she hated them, not because she needed to prove anything, but because she finally understood that forgiveness does not always mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it simply means walking through a new one and letting the old one stay closed. Inside the sunlit lobby, a little boy in a Spider-Man jacket tugged on her sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" he asked, eyes wide. Alia knelt so they were eye level. "I'm one of them," she said gently. He held out a slightly crushed dandelion he'd picked from the courtyard. "For you. Why did you give us a home?" Alia took the flower, tucking it carefully into her pocket. "Because once, a long time ago, someone gave me one when I had none," she answered. "And I promised I would pass it on." The boy grinned, missing 2 front teeth, then ran off to join the other children exploring their new world. Outside, the celebration continued. Speeches, music, ribbon cuttings, photographs. Inside Second Home, the future began. Alia stood in the courtyard for a long moment, breathing in the scent of rosemary and fresh earth. Families were already moving through the halls, some crying with relief, some laughing in disbelief, all carrying the quiet wonder of people who had been told they were disposable and discovered they were not. Odora found her there an hour later, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You did it," Odora said simply, offering 1 cup. "We did it," Alia corrected. Odora's eyes shone. "The river is yours now. Don't ever dam it for anyone who doesn't deserve to drink." Alia nodded. "I won't." They stood in companionable silence, watching children run past with balloons, watching mothers unpack small treasures into new apartments, watching lives begin again. Later that evening, after the crowds had gone and the news vans departed, Alia walked the empty hallways alone. She paused at the community kitchen where residents would soon cook together, at the clinic where a mother would bring her sick child without fear of bills, at the preschool room painted sunshine yellow. In the quiet, she pulled the dandelion from her pocket. It was wilted now, but still bright. She pressed it between the pages of the leather binder Claudia had given her on her first day, the one that had once felt like boot, camp, and now felt like scripture. Some doors close forever, others open and never shut again. Alia Vance had walked through the right one, and she was finally, irrevocably, breathtakingly home.